Endgame's second week in the box office has finished. It has only been 14 days. It feels a lot longer than that. And it has smashed all kinds of records over the last 14 days. The actual box office total worldwide right now is $2,328,235,585. And in the US domestic market, it has $660 million, and all the records, pretty much all of the records are Avengers Endgames. There are some records for slowest to an amount of money. I wouldn't really call that a record, but Endgame hasn't got the slowest to $200 million, for example. That is something that Box Office Mojo lists, but all of the good records, Endgame has all of them. It had the most advanced screening money. It beats Star Wars The Force Awakens amount for that. It beats the amount that Star Wars The Force Awakens got with inflation. It has the biggest weekend money. It has the biggest one-day money. It had the biggest total after 5 days, 8 days, 14 days, whichever amount of days you want to put in. It has all of the records. The $660 million that it has right now at the end of the second week, that just beats what Star Wars The Force Awakens got. Star Wars The Force Awakens got $651 million. So all of the records basically belong to Endgame. They were partially The Force Awakens and partially Infinity War, but now they're all basically listed as Endgame's records. And here we have the records for the US domestic market. On the left-hand side, we have the inflation-adjusted records, and on the right-hand side, we have the non-inflation-adjusted records. So if you look at the right-hand side first, Avengers Endgame, it's listed here on Box Office Mojo as having $652 million. That was the previous day's total. Right now it has $660 million. The $660 million will just overtake Titanic. So Titanic has $659 million there. The 660, it overtakes Titanic. It is now the fifth largest film ever in the US domestic market after only 14 days. And it is just behind Infinity War. Now, I think it'll get somewhere around $17 or $18 million on Friday, so that means it may not actually overtake Infinity War on Friday, but it will definitely overtake Infinity War on the Saturday, and it'll overtake Black Panther very soon as well. So very soon, it'll be the number 3 film in the US domestic market, just behind Avatar's $760 million. On the left-hand side, where we have the inflation-adjusted totals, we have the $660 million would be just over the $654 million that Sleeping Beauty has there. So it is the 34th biggest film ever with inflation in the US domestic box office. Now, I've highlighted two of the strange things you might notice if you're eagle-eyed here. I've got the Black Panther and the Infinity War non-inflation adjusted money. So in red there, you see I've highlighted on both charts the $700 million the Black Panther got, and in green I've highlighted the $678 million that Avengers Infinity War got. But if you look at the left-hand side where they have their inflation-adjusted total, you can see those numbers are actually less. It has adjusted Black Panther down to $687 million, and it's adjusted Infinity War down to $652 million. And the reason for that is that Box Office Mojo has the average ticket price for 2019 being less than the average ticket price for 2018. So when you put inflation on using the 2019 figures on their website, the prices actually go down from 2018. Now, it's not just the 2018 released films that go down. All the films go down. It's just it's more noticeable on a film that was released in 2018 because it drops by what seems to be a significant figure. But one of the strange things that actually happens is if we look at the non-inflation adjusted totals on the right-hand side, it says that Endgame has not got more money than Infinity War. But if we look at the inflation-adjusted totals on the left-hand side, it says that Endgame has earned more money than Infinity War, which is normally the opposite of what will happen if you put inflation on. Normally the older films move up the list. But again, just a bit of a strange thing here with the 2019 figures right now saying that ticket prices are now cheaper than they were, which means every dollar you earned last year isn't quite worth a dollar from this year. So the actual numbers are sort of pushed down a little bit. So just a little bit of a strange thing there you might notice if you look at some of these charts from time to time. So onto our chart, once again, we have The Force Awakens, Avatar, Infinity War, Endgame, Jurassic World, and The Last Jedi. And Avengers Endgame, the green line there, we can see it's nearly touching the blue line. So the Thursday totals for both Star Wars The Force Awakens and Endgame are basically the same. Endgame's a little bit in front, about $9 million in front, but on this kind of scale out, they're basically touching. Star Wars might overtake it on the next day, but it'll be close. Star Wars The Force Awakens will overtake it on the Saturday. So on the Saturday, they'll both cross the $700 million mark. This will be the first record that Endgame doesn't actually get. It will tie for the quickest $700 million mark, if it gets the kind of money I think that it'll earn. So it won't actually get the record. It'll tie Star Wars The Force Awakens for the fastest ever $700 million mark. But after that, it will cross underneath the blue line. So the blue line here, we can see the Star Wars The Force Awakens line. That will be above the green line at the end of the weekend. So, and then at that point in time, I don't think that Endgame can ever come back. So Endgame is going to earn less money than Star Wars The Force Awakens. The only question is how much less. So Star Wars The Force Awakens has a massive amount of money. It has about $936 million. And the next one we have is Avatar with $760. So there's a really big gap between the current number one and the current number two films, Star Wars The Force Awakens and Avatar. If we look back at the inflation-adjusted box office for the US domestic market, we can see if there's any other targets we can kind of fit into a chart here other than just Avatar and The Force Awakens, because there's a very big gap between them. Now, if you look at the dates for all of these films around about this figure here, they're all fairly old, which unfortunately means the daily box office numbers aren't readily available. The weekly numbers are, but the daily numbers really aren't. So the only two films on here that actually do have the daily numbers easy to get a hold of are Star Wars The Phantom Menace from 1999 and Avatar from 2009. And so what I've done is I've grabbed those and put inflation on them and put them onto a chart. And so on this chart here, I've got the original Avatar and original Force Awakens amount there, just to give a sort of scale compared to the other one. And I've added in the inflation-adjusted Avatar in purple and the inflation-adjusted Phantom Menace in red. Now, the Phantom Menace might look a little bit strange. It has a second bump after it was sort of dying in the box office. That's where it was re-released in 3D. So it actually has two releases there, and it got a bit of an extra money there. So that's not a mistake as such. That is actually how the box office went, a very abnormal box office, because the film was re-released. But that gives us two more targets here that we didn't have in the other chart to fill this kind of big gap between The Force Awakens and Avatar. And in orange here, I've had my predicted amounts so far for Endgame. So I think Endgame is still going to get somewhere around the inflation-adjusted Avatar total, but I think it might actually be a little bit underneath that. I think it'll get far more money than what the inflation-adjusted Phantom Menace will get, but it does give us a few more things on this chart to actually look at rather than just saying that it is underneath The Force Awakens, which I think it will be soon, and it just won't catch up again. So rather than just saying, yes, it's under Force Awakens, can it actually stay above this inflation-adjusted Avatar total? Now, the lengths here denote how long they're in the movies for. So you can see Avatar, not only did it earn a lot of money, it just stayed in the movies for a very long period of time as well. It didn't earn that much in a lot of its run, obviously, but it was in there for a very long period of time compared to Star Wars The Force Awakens. And on the total world box office, Avengers Endgame overtook Titanic on Sunday, and then it looks like it didn't do much on the Monday, the Tuesday, the Wednesday, or the Thursday, but it actually did. It's just when we're dealing with $2 billion, the extra money doesn't look like that much. So it's got about $140 million more than what it had on Sunday. That's a lot of money, but again, when we've moved from, say, 2.2 billion to 2.3, it doesn't sound that exciting, but it has moved up by a fair amount of money, but it still does have a long way to go to get to the Avatar total, the record here, $2.788 billion. And on the total worldwide gross with inflation, Endgame is the 7th largest film ever. I did say I thought it could overtake The Sound of Music by Thursday, but it's not. It's about $4 million off, so it's really close, but it's not quite over the top of Sound of Music yet. It should overtake both The Sound of Music and E.T. on Friday, depending on when the international numbers come in, and it will be the 5th largest film ever. And then after that, the next film is at the same sort of target as what Avatar had without inflation. It's $2.7 billion, which may be a lot of money. It may not be able to get there, but Endgame will be the 5th largest film at the end of the weekend. So it probably should do it on Friday, but at the end of the weekend, 5th largest film ever with inflation. In a previous video of mine, I said that Endgame had just overtaken Titanic's foreign inflation-adjusted total of $1.6 billion to become the 3rd biggest film ever in the foreign market with inflation. That is not correct. Some kind people pointed out quite a few times to me that my Titanic number there is crazy because without inflation it's about $1.4 billion. So what is going on with only having $1.6 billion there? Well, I had a look, and the amount of money I was using for Titanic's total for the foreign market was about $700 million less than what pretty much everywhere lists. So I have no idea what amount of money I was using there. I don't know where I grabbed it from, but the amount of money that the Box Office Mojo and the Numbers.com have listed for Titanic was drastically more than the figure I was actually using. So this $1.6 billion there, that's missing about $700 million before I put inflation on for where I think the actual accurate amount of money is for the foreign amount of money for Titanic. And so if I add back in this $700 million for Titanic, no, Endgame has not earned more money than Titanic in the inflation-adjusted foreign market. So $2.8 billion for Titanic in the foreign market. Endgame's got $1.66 billion right now. So Endgame most definitely has not earned more money than Titanic earned in the foreign inflation-adjusted total. It has earned more money without inflation, but with inflation, nowhere near. On to the Chinese box office, and Detective Pikachu has overtaken Avengers Endgame. Avengers Endgame got about $4 million for Friday in China, and the Pokemon film has got over $11 million for Friday, and so Endgame is no longer the number one film in the Chinese market. It does have a massive $592 million total right now from China, but it's been earning somewhere around $4 million per day for the last few days, and so it should earn perhaps tens of millions of dollars more, but not a massive amount of money more. Okay, so we've already got nearly $600 million here. It's probably not going to get $620 million. It'll probably get something like $605, $610 million, which is pretty much in line with what Deadline reported over a week ago. So they've got some good projections going for Endgame, and they said it will be something like $606 million about a week ago in the Chinese market. And in the US domestic market, the $7.5 million estimated for Thursday is what brought its total up to $660 million for the end of the second week. That's a bit smaller than the $8 million I expected it to get, and because of that, I think it'll get a bit less money on the weekend than I thought it would have. At the start of the week, I thought it would get about $80 million. I think yesterday or the day before I said $73 million. Now I think it'll be under $70 million for the weekend for Endgame. Now you can see here the advanced screening money for Detective Pikachu for Thursday, the $5.7 million. That will be added to its weekend total, as all the films always add their Thursday openings onto the weekend. And right now, the studio, Warner Brothers, thinks they'll get about $50 million for the weekend, but a lot of other estimates are saying $75, maybe $80 million. So I think there's a good chance now that the Pokemon film will earn more money than Endgame this weekend, but either way I think it'll be very close. So Endgame may still be the number one in the box office, or maybe not. I'm leaning more towards not now. I think that it's a good chance that it won't be number one, but either way they'll be fairly similar. So I think the two of them will get quite a similar weekend, and it's the first real film that's actually challenged Endgame in any way. The previous weekend, everything got absolutely demolished by Endgame. So absolutely massive total for 2 weeks for Endgame, $2.3 billion and $660 million in the US market, and the $594 million in China. Everywhere you look, it's smashed all kinds of records. It does look like the record breaking is now at an end after 2 weeks, but it has basically got every single record in the US domestic market, and it has a lot of the records in the foreign markets. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.